The virtual CISO moment is brought to you by vCISO Services, a leading provider of quality and experienced virtual chief information security officers for small and mid-sized businesses. Check them out at vcisoservices.com. Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the virtual CISO moment. Donna Gallaher joins us. She is the president and CEO of New Oceans Enterprises. She is a vCISO. She's involved with cybersecurity, data privacy advisor. She is very much involved with FAIR. That's the quantitative risk management, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and also a board advisor. Donna, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be with you, Greg.
So that's a lot of stuff you do. You didn't just start doing that as like a child. How did you get from where you were to where you're at now?
Well, it took a couple of pivots. So my undergraduate degree is actually as an electrical engineer. So I started my career in electrical engineering and nuclear power, of all things.
Wow.
I was an electrical engineer in a power plant. And I was kind of like Homer Simpson working the control room at 3 o'clock in the morning,
Did you
and
have the
decided
donuts?
I really, donuts in there. No, we couldn't have donuts in the control room, and how
Yeah, but
Homer
that never
gets them in
stopped.
there.
That never stopped Homer, though. So
Well, he has had some episodes of like coffee spilling on the
yeah.
controls and shorting out the plant and going, atomic there. And yeah, that's true. So I can tell you that. But it just wasn't the life that I wanted. I liked being an engineer and solving problems, and I liked some of the critical infrastructure stuff, and I liked knowing how everything was wired together, and logic flow, and but it wasn't the right thing. I was too much of an extrovert to really want to sit, and it was very male dominated. I think it was the only female engineer in the whole plant.
Mm.
So like I said, I didn't have friends. Like I said, the guys would all go out together and pick up women, and I would be home because I just didn't have any friends. So it was just not what I wanted. So I kind of picked up and I said, I want to change my life. And I actually had some cousins in Huntsville, Alabama. So I was actually living up in New York, and went to school at Auburn in Alabama, and had been wanting to move back to Atlanta and Alabama. Well, specifically Atlanta, but kind of through Alabama is how I ultimately got transferred back.
Hmm.
But they were looking for electrical engineers in selling semiconductors. They wanted like all of their sales engineers to be their salespeople to be electrical engineers. So I said, well, I don't really remember that much about semiconductor and chip design. And, I wasn't a microcontroller, ASICs designer or anything like that. But, I had kind of the checkbox, and it was more relationship sales. It turned out to be, but then I got into more higher level sales as my sales career kind of developed, and more custom services. I got into some of the voice over IP services. I sold
Hmm.
phone systems and voicemail systems and maintenance, and just in time delivery of replacement parts for some of the phone systems. So really enjoyed that, but I guess the problem with sales was once I made the sale, and if the customer had any problems with their experience, I felt like it was my credibility that was taking a hit. And
Mm.
I wanted to have kind of more control over the customer's experience. So I wanted to do more of a customer advocacy type of role. So that's when I kind of pivoted again into IT service delivery, so IT managed services. So I work with both InfoCrossing at the time. Then they were ultimately purchased by Wipro, but they were doing mainframe managed services. And then
Hmm.
I took a role with SunGuard Managed Services Division in service delivery. And so I've got about 10 years of managed IT services as kind of IT operations, general director. You kind of get to see all kinds of customers too. I mean, I had clients in retail and
Mm.
banking, energy. I had one in mining and minerals and um, chemical additives, just all kinds of variety. So it was almost like working for a Big Four consulting firm, only being in the day-to-day operations. So I feel like I could eat those guys for lunch because I've actually seen it all. They've kind of read the textbook, but I've actually lived in the IT operations for all those organizations, which was, you know, a really valuable time in my life and skill to pick up. But I wasn't getting promoted. You know, I was kind of training people who were less experienced than me and not getting paid, you know, what they were, and just, you know, really wanted to move on. And the only way I could do that was to leave the company.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up joining ABB Software as director of service delivery, and that was really providing internal IT services to our developers. And I ended up taking over global infrastructure operations and was kind of the interim CISO as we had just gone through an acquisition, and I was kind of responsible for aligning the acquired companies to the corporate policy and corporate security program. And the division that I came from was pretty small. And it was actually was a cluster of small software companies that were bought up, and they were bundled together and called ABB Software. And we were like trying to standardize our services. So that was like I said, I had 3 jobs at the same time. They were meant to be temporary,
Wow.
but out ABB was the best company I ever worked for. I'll tell you, they really treated me very well. They challenged me. They believed in me. They gave me opportunities. They gave me training. Can't say enough good things about them. But like I said, after they filled the other 2 roles of vCISO and global infrastructure, operations director, I'm like, well, now I'm bored, now what do I do? So the choice was either kind of move to Switzerland, to work in the headquarters. And I really didn't want to do that. So I ended up taking a severance package after being with them for only a year. They gave me 6 months of severance and
Wow.
said, let's just that they were a fantastic
That's
company.
awesome.
And they gave me a bonus too at the end. So it was, very, very good experience there at ABB. And that's kind of when I said I'd only worked in IT at that point. So I said, well, let me take some of this severance money they gave me and see if I can learn a new skill. And I took a CISSP boot camp thinking I was going to learn something new. And lo and behold, after 10 years of IT managed services,
You knew
I
it
was
all.
doing all of that. I could have taught the class. Exactly.
Exactly.
So again, passed it on my first attempt, and then I
Hmm.
was kind of knighted from there on, to be the torchbearer and the champion for doing things right.
Uh-huh.
And I guess my first job actually in security, I was kind of the liaison between the IT team and the security team, taking the Big Four consultant recommendations and telling them, you want to do what? Well, here's the problems that it's going to cause, and here's how this is going to go over, and whatnot. And then I guess the challenge we had at that company was they were under an FTC consent decree. They guess they had found some problems with their security program in previous years, and they were having an FTC evidentiary audit every other
Hmm.
year where they go through and show me your program is fully working. And what had happened is they had just migrated out of a parent company data center into their own data center. So the technology moved over, the hardware components moved over, but not the people and processes. No one actually went in and built that stuff, and that was the controls we were failing on. So the CIO asked me, Donna, I need a remediation program, but I don't have any money to give you. and we don't have any people, that you can have on your team for
Well,
this.
that's standard infosec. So,
So that's standard infosec. But what we ended up doing was I met with each of the um, executive managers and explain to them, here's the controls that are failing that are within your within your department, and ask them if they could sign a key control owner to each who was responsible for the operational resolution of whatever the failure was. And ask them, lay out your steps, what's your plan, here's where we think it's going, and would have them report back into me here's the status of my controls of what it is. And we created a dashboard, and we started out with all the controls red, and over time moved them to yellow, to light green. And then we had IT audit come in and retest for 2 months in order for them to get a pass on their control. And by the time the FTC came in, everything was green. So that's that. And I've really kind of used that as a model for how I like to build security programs, is really don't put me in the middle of it as the security person. Of let's educate the business on where their risks are and make them ownable, and it's their butt that has to report to their manager, and his has to report to the CEO of what the status of risks are within the department, and what the status is, and get them to understand where their failure points are, where their dependencies are, and you know make, like I said, make them accountable for risk, and you're there as the
Exactly.
advisor, and that's how
Right.
it's supposed to be.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Totally agree.
I said after that, I guess I moved on to a couple other roles. I worked in fintech for a while, designing security programs for income, and I had some GDPR requirements that I had to satisfy as part of that job. So I did some self-study, and I earned my CIPPE and CIPM certificates, and then you're recognized as a fellow of information privacy. So now I do security and privacy.
Hmm.
And I guess I was also, so I guess that's when I started toying around with FAIR and doing the self-study on quantitative risk analysis. Actually, no, it didn't come until later. I got my privacy certifications and said, that was great. I learned something new. And then I think after I left Incom, that's when I decided to start my own business. And that's really when I guess got into FAIR. And I guess the reason was, people would say, so what, and I didn't ever really know how to answer that question. Here's some controls you're not meeting, and you should put in multi-factor authentication, or you should harden your devices, or you should, do these different things. And they say, why, or so what? And I said, well, because this could happen. Well, so what if that happens? It kind of got into this so what thing. And I didn't have a good answer for that question. So when I understood, and I said, as the CEO, you're responsible for making the financial decisions for your company, and you have no money in your bank account when you start out, and you've got to take, the billings that you made last month and purchase a tool for this month, or to grow, or to put a new marketing strategy together, or to attend a conference. And you have to be able to justify, why am I going to spend this money on this rather than that? And I didn't really appreciate that really until I became a CEO and had to make those decisions for myself. So, and like I
And
said,
of course,
that's
for people who are not familiar with the FAIR acronym, it is factor of uh, FAIR, factor
factor
analysis
analysis
of
of
information
information
risk.
risk.
Risk,
Yes.
yes. I had to spell it out in my head. So
Yep.
it's basically a quantitative risk assessment methodology to be able to answer those questions of the so what, of like, well, how much is our cost exposure? How much will it cost to fix it? And do they actually make sense? Because you don't want to fix a $10,000 problem with a $50,000 solution, something like that.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So
So yeah.
you opened up you put your shingle out, so to speak, and started
Mhm.
your own business in 2018, New Oceans Enterprises. It's an interesting name. Where did that come from?
So there's an Andre Gide quote that I learned from an old Successories poster, and it was remember Successories, those in the mall, that they had
Mm-hmm.
those like really pretty, inspirational quotes and stuff. Well, this Andre Gide quote said, "Man will never discover new oceans until he has the courage to lose sight of the shore." So like that's really great for like a risk management sort of poster tagline thing of I wanted to have kind of a nautical theme to it, because my husband's a sailor, and I kind of nod to the Navy. I kind of think of myself as like the captain, that's kind of out there in the dark ocean, navigating by the shore and the stars, of really not having fancy equipment as a virtual CISO or a lot of money.
Uh-huh.
You really just kind of have your smarts, that you take out in a little dinghy in a little boat, and you have to get from A to B. And I think that's very much what virtual CISOs are doing. Is we don't have big budgets, we don't have a lot of tools and fancy stuff, but we know how to prioritize things. We know how to collaborate and facilitate discussions, and we know how to get people to work together.
Mhm.
And I just thought that that was really a nice theme for the company. So I used the sextant as my logo, and New Oceans is the name of the company.
And what are your target business vertical sizes, locations, or do you work on with everybody?
Well, I do work with everybody, and it's been kind of a mix.
Mhm.
My first clients were, small businesses and very small businesses. I mean, less than maybe 20 people. So I've got some startups that just, it's kind of when you open your business, you kind of figure out where the money comes in first, and then where
This
the
is true.
referrals come in first from.
Right.
And this was just kind of what they said. I guess with some of my first customers, they'd never been through an assessment before, and their customers were starting to ask security questions, and they didn't know how to answer them. They didn't even know what they were asking, or they were trying to get insurance, and they're like, we can't even get insurance. Can you look at our questions that we answered,
Mm.
and explain to us why?
Oh, we lost your audio.
There we go. Sorry, I think I just hit a button as I was sliding my hand over here.
No worries. That's
Um,
good.
so like I said, it was just some very basic things that they needed, just getting basic policies and stuff together. And then I had another client, actually from ABB. It was a former colleague of mine who was starting a business in software development, and he knew he wasn't going to be able to sell anything until his product was secured. So we built a security program around his tools, and now that's not an obstacle. Now security is a sales enabler for him.
Oh,
And
good.
then I've got some other customers that maybe they've got a good CIO and a good CTO, but maybe they don't have specific security governance expertise at their executive level, and they just need a coach. They just need someone to kind of maybe help them with their policies or their priorities, explain the different controls to them of how they work and how they're tested. And like I said, because I came from an IT operations background, I'm able to kind of pull all those things together for them and
Mhm.
and serve as a coach. So it's kind of been a blend of those. I actually have not done that much with FAIR consulting, and that was originally part of the plan for me, was to do FAIR consulting and put FAIR programs into large enterprises. But that's not really taken off for me. I think that's still something I'd like to do, that I still would offer as a service, but just haven't closed a contract on that yet. And then I guess the other thing that I'm really doing, that I am using FAIR for, is I'm looking to do more around board work and
Mm.
advising boards of directors, and either as an advisor or as a board member, as their cyber data privacy and IT operations expert. And that's going well. So that's, I think, really is where I can use my FAIR skills, because now the SEC has come out with you know with recommendations for your public, like for public disclosures for your quarterly filings, to have quantitative risk analysis, and it's pretty much using the FAIR thesaurus, for how they define the terms and what they all mean and how to do it. So I think that that's going to probably be a bigger part of what I do to in the future for Donna.
Well, I'm a little I'm surprised and not surprised because as far as like the first part of what you were saying with regards to FAIR not getting as much traction with SMBs, because one thing I would think is that um, a risk for SMBs is really the not knowing what they're knowing, because I think so many of them are just beholden like to MSPs that say put in this tool, you'll be secure and all of that. But I mean, that would just be one risk that small and mid-sized businesses are exposed to. And I know you've worked with several SMBs over the years. Today, at this moment, what would you think is like the biggest risk to small and mid-sized businesses, information security wise?
Well, I think a lot of it is visibility of risk, still, and having a good model to prioritize, what do we do at what point. And, I probably should have chosen some other words of saying, it's not been a big part of my business. And what I mean is to say, setting up formal programs at enterprise companies, actually creating Monte Carlo distributions
Okay.
and
Okay.
and that kind of stuff. That's not really
Gotcha.
taken off for me, but you can use FAIR methodology in any sort of small business of just saying,
Absolutely. Yeah.
in terms of orders of magnitude, this is going to put you out of business, and this is really just a compliance check mark, so let's do the one that's going to put you out of business first. And you don't, those are hard to quantify. I mean, you really kind of have to do is this a t-shirt size risk, extra large, medium, small, where does it kind of fall in there in terms of the financial impact to the company? And that's how you prioritize. And that I kind of already do naturally. So I don't even think about it as fair. And that's not true. It actually is fair. And then the other thing is applying fair to third-party risk management, of looking at your vendors and saying, you're sharing what data with them? Well, let's look at the controls specifically around, the service that they're providing, and see what questions we really need to ask this vendor or this partner to make sure that they're secure. So I do stand corrected on that, Greg. You
Well,
called me out
that's
on it. You're right.
no, that's probably my misinterpretation, but that's fine. But I know you're so involved in FAIR, and I see a lot of what you post about, and I wish that I was more involved. I feel guilty. I've never been to FairCon, for example. I think that's the name of it, and that's
And
coming
it's
up soon,
coming
is
up.
it not?
It is. It is coming up in September. It is 27th and 28th, and there's actually training available. That's in Washington, D.C. And if you go to fairinstitute.org, you can find all about FairCon 22, get trained, and like I said, learn about it. Now, I think one of the questions that we're probably going to ask me is, why not are people not implementing FAIR? And the most common objection that I hear is that it's just too hard. People don't know where to start, and we've said this even from 2 years ago conference was, start somewhere. It's to do your first analysis, and then do a second one, and then do a third one. Take your best guess of where you think your risks are that you can, prioritize, and practice.
I think one of the problems, or I shouldn't say problem, but I think one of the challenges with people first looking at FAIR is that they start from the bottom up. And it's like, if you don't need to get into the weeds that much, if you can make estimates, and you'd have to actually look at the diagram on how everything's together. You know what I mean? People listening would know what I mean
The
from the bottom
tree,
up
yeah.
of the tree. Yeah. And you mentioned FAIR Institute. Now that is something that I'm a member of, and they have excellent training there. They actually, I think that they still have like um, a, an application there that you can actually do your own FAIR assessments as part of learning, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
They do have a free version of the tool available where you can run one analysis at a time. And I think there may also be, through the open group, there's a certification because the Open FAIR Foundation certification. I think they still might have an Excel spreadsheet that you
Yes.
can run one at
Yeah.
a time. So there are some tools out there, and then some other companies have kind of developed some other tools. So I know either they're using Risk Lens, I guess the founders of inventors of FAIR, also started another company to actually run the software. So that's
Right.
kind of the tool for that. But I think IBM might have a tool, or Cisco might have a tool that they developed internally, to run the Monte Carlo analysis. And I guess the hope is that other people will create programs that are using the methodology.
I do remember I'm Open FAIR certified through the Open Group, and that you can, and this might be outdated, so have to check. But at the time, you could use the spreadsheet tool for your own company, but you couldn't use it as a consultant unless you were licensed, and the license fee was something nominal for the year. I think they probably still have that model there. But I want to pivot, because I know we don't have endless time. Getting back into the virtual CISO space. You're very much involved in something that I wish I was also, I keep on saying that. It's like wish I was more involved with. and that is the vCISO Catalyst. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how that might be a good resource for virtual CISOs and others?
Sure. So I guess when I started my virtual CISO business, and Greg, you were one of the first people I think I connected with when I spun out on my own.
You were one of the
Um,
first people I connected with when I
yeah,
spun out on my
I
own. So.
quickly figured out that I didn't have a team, like I had in my enterprise job. So if I had, a security architecture question, I could go to somebody and
Mhm.
say, I've run into this before. Does anyone know about this? Or we're having this problem. So you really need a community of subject matter experts, whether it be, domain experience or just, governance and leadership. So we kind of started organically, just virtual CISOs that kind of figured out they didn't like the rules that they were being required to work under a corporation, and they just felt like I need to be an outsider. I need to be truly independent, and give unbiased advice to a company, and not be the one that takes the fall when the company makes bad decisions. So like I said, the group just kind of started growing. We started a Slack channel, and we started meeting, every other week, just for a networking call. Just has anyone run into this problem before? Does anyone have a tool or solutions for this? A free way of getting that done. And the group has grown organically to probably have about 200 members now in the U.S. and Canada.
Can
And
anybody join, or do they have to be a
anyone
virtual CISO?
well, we do want to make it vendor agnostic. So that's another common complaint that we had in the space was vendors just kind of take over the content, and they never really talk about security problems holistically. They talk about their tool and they never get to the people and processes. And we didn't want to have to worry about our email addresses, our corporate email being given
Right.
out to everybody. So we wanted to create a group that was truly independent, vendor agnostic, truly virtual CISO to virtual CISO to, understand how to help their programs. And like I said, a lot of people on the call, they've never built businesses before. They're not entrepreneurs, so they don't know finance or accounting or marketing or public speaking or whatever. So there's skills that needed to be developed. So we wanted to be a resource for those virtual CISOs to, fill in the skills that they didn't have, and have a community that they can go through for unbiased advice. So that's what the group's for.
Excellent. We'll put a link in the show notes. I only got a couple minutes left. What are your future plans?
Well, I do want to develop that virtual CISO Catalyst group more. We actually are going to be incorporating as a public benefit corporation, but it is going to remain free. Like you said, there's going to be a free version, and hopefully our paid members will offer them some other services like background checks, referrals, maybe other member benefit discounts that hopefully we can offer. So we've got a few ideas in mind of how we want to fund the organization, but our commitment is to remain, supporting small and medium businesses, independent, security practitioners, and vendor agnostic type of space.
That's awesome. Well, it's been a wonderful conversation. Wish we could go longer, but I use the free Zoom for this, and you can see the ticking down going
Yep.
on right now.
Yep.
So, but that's good because it helps to keep me on point too. But I really appreciate you joining us today.
You're very welcome, Greg. You have a great week.
And everybody, stay secure.